So being that September is Hispanic Heritage Month, I figured it would be nice to talk about my own experience as a Spanish, Mexican, American person, and how throughout a lot of my life I felt really pressured to act white, to act American, usually from a place of self-preservation. But what I've realized is that no matter how white passing you might truly be, there will always be people who will treat you like a minority when it suits them for you to be one, and they won't see you as that when it suits them for you not to be a minority. And we shouldn't censor or be ashamed of these very crucial aspects of what makes us who we are. I can't go back and undo the past and tell the younger version of myself to not be ashamed of being a Mexican girl. There's nothing wrong with that. But now that I see that for myself, I'm glad that I have the rest of my life to learn more about where I come from and my culture, and to reconcile with that little brown girl inside of me that I was secretly so ashamed of. Hola Chulas! Thank you so much for clicking onto this video. And if you are new here, well then hi, hello, my name is Kai. And if you're coming back to my channel, you might notice that I am slightly nervous, slightly intimidated, because this is the first video that I'm posting since I've decided to go in a different direction. And no matter how big your audience is, it always feels a little bit intimidating to just talk about something else, maybe something a little bit out of your element. So I guess today we're talking about colorism and the perks and the perils of being a vanilla Mexican. So let's go!
Can I get your name and where you're from, if you don't mind?
I'm Kai.
Kai, can I get spelling for you?
Straight out of Dogtown, K-A-I. I'm Jesus Christ, and I can do anything I f***ing want to.
Before we get into everything, if you wouldn't mind, oh my gosh, to like and subscribe this video. It does definitely help me out, and also it lets me know if you are genuinely interested in this kind of content. Now that I am doing something different, I would really be interested in knowing what kinds of topics my audience likes, what they don't like. Let me know in the comments down below, and all the other good stuff. So essentially what we're talking about today is the unfortunate reality of colorism, which suggests that people of a lighter complexion are just inherently treated or viewed a little better than they are people who are darker complected, even though they would exist in the same national or ethnic group. So I myself am a Hispanic person. I would consider myself to be like sort of a mix of Mexican and Spanish. A lot of my family is European from Spain, Spanish, but a good majority of my family is also native Mexican. So I love both of these cultures, and I'm trying to learn more about them, especially because I feel like I just grew up really, really American. I definitely felt a lot of pressure to be white or to be perceived as white because the area that we were living in, it tended to be the case that if you were Hispanic or a brown person, that you were actually of a lower socioeconomic class. And I think there's a lot of connotations and implications that come with that I sort of wanted to distance myself from. And that is definitely an action that was taken out of classism and just not fully understanding the systems that keep people of color in a lower class a lot of the time. It's not an indictment of somebody's character to be of a lower socioeconomic status, and it says more about the actual country that we live in and, again, the systems that are at play here. I spent a lot of my life thinking that there was almost something wrong about being a brown person, and I've felt in a lot of ways that I was always just too brown to be white and too white to be brown. And these are all things that I'm having a really hard time saying out loud because it's genuinely upsetting that I would even think about myself this way or that I would think about other people this way. And I am really glad that I'm in a space now where I am able to recognize that and to unpack that for what it truly is. I'm not being fair to myself, and I'm not being fair to everyone around me when I still hold on to these like unconscious biases. Now, the state that I grew up in is majority white, but the actual city that I lived in has a really substantial Hispanic population. So I grew up around Hispanic people. It's not like I grew up like totally removed from them altogether. It sounds really silly to say, but I just never saw us as having anything in common. I can totally say that I have benefited from being a lighter complected person. I'm not so Hispanic that people label me with like the typical stereotypes that are unfortunately still at play in a lot of people's minds. It's just so like in our culture to think of Mexican people in a certain way. As long as I've been like conscious of that sort of thing, I can recognize that Mexican people have been targeted in this society. You're not from here, you're an illegal alien, go back to your own country, you don't even speak our language, yada yada yada, they're stealing our jobs. I've never experienced really that level of vitriol in my life, and I think that that has been unfortunately a comfort that is afforded to me because I just don't present as Hispanic enough. I've always thought of it like I'm not so brown that I get racially profiled, but I am brown enough to be a good diversity hire, which is a whole other conversation that we could definitely talk about some other time. I consider myself to be white passing. Other white people would say no. This is gonna sound kind of sick in the head, and I can appreciate that. But the times in my life where you could say that I was discriminated against for being a Hispanic person, I felt like my cultural identity was being validated, even if it was in a negative way. So here's a fun story. When I was younger, I was in like the 5th grade. My parents uprooted me from an inner city school where I was actually around a lot of people of color to a school that was a little bit more affluent, therefore a lot more white. I was probably like one of 7 minority children in this whole school. So I'm in the 5th grade, I'm like, oh my god, I'm like 10 years old, and I'm just doing my assignments in class like everybody else, and I got pulled from the classroom to go into like one of those storage trailer classrooms, and it was the ESL teacher. She was giving me an evaluation because she wanted to make sure that my reading comprehension was the level that it needed to be. Always got really high grades in English literature. I know it probably doesn't seem like it now, but I did. And it didn't really make a lot of sense to me because I really remember at that time, like I was reading books that were grade levels above me. So I just didn't really understand like where this was coming from. Literally a whole evaluation, like she was holding up pictures and she was trying to ask me to like describe what was happening in the picture. And she started asking me questions like, well, does your mom speak English? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, does she speak Spanish? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, okay, well, does your dad speak Spanish? And I was like, he pretends to. She's like, well, does he understand English? And I was like, I think so. Like, went home and I told my mom about it because I thought it was like so strange. And she was like, oh my god, they did a racism against you. And I didn't know how or why. But that lady legitimately thought that because of my last name, my Hispanic last name, that I didn't speak English very well. Even though this school would have had to have received my transcripts, right? They would have had to have known what kind of student I was before I was enrolled in this school. So I don't know in what world they wouldn't have known my reading comprehension skills. And at that point, I'd been in the classroom for a couple of months. So if my teacher genuinely thought that there was an issue, she would have found out pretty fucking fast, not a few months in. And so that was the first time that I really remember somebody thinking less of my ability because like on the basis of my Hispanic name. I think the first time that I ever actually even realized that I was a Hispanic person was also in school. I was like coloring, I was drawing like pictures of my family with these 2 other girls who happened to be white. And I think we all know the trope of the flesh-colored crayon, the apricot crayon. That's kind of like the default flesh crayon in a lot of people's minds, even though, of course, other people with other complexions exist. They always have. And so I asked to have the skin color crayon, or give me the peach crayon. And the two girls looked at me and they're like, no, you need a brown crayon. And I was like, no, what are you talking about? And so I was so frustrated about it, and I went and told my mom, and she was like, well, yeah, we're brown, we're Mexican. I was like, what does that mean? Because I didn't know what that meant at that point, to be Mexican. I was flabbergasted, but that was the first time that anybody had ever told me that I was a Hispanic person. I've also had the experience of being like baby's first Latina girlfriend. Some typically white man would tell me something like, I have never dated a Latina before. And it's like, well, guess what? You still really haven't, because I grew up in Idaho. It's rough out here being multiple hub categories at the same time. So being that I am pretty light complected, but still an ethnic person, I've attracted a lot of men who maybe they want a Hispanic girlfriend, but they also don't. So they date somebody like me who is on paper a Hispanic person, but without all of the other associations that they wrongfully have about Latina women. This is most easily identified as the spicy Latina trope, where Hispanic and Latina women are portrayed as angry and exotic, which communicates that a Latina woman only exists to tempt her white savior. I'm assuming to these certain types of men who fetishize exotic women but don't actually respect the culture that they come from, having a white passing Latina partner is truly the best of both worlds. While society is shifting away from Eurocentric beauty standards, and we see a rise in the popularity of the ethnically ambiguous woman, we have to be able to distinguish between patronization and genuine appreciation for what makes her so special. So I've always had super coarse and textured hair. I guess I never understood fully that that was a symbol of my cultural heritage. When I was younger, I had dated this guy who was a white man, and he really didn't like the texture of my hair. I have really curly hair, and I have this fabulous hairline, right? Like, look at all these baby hairs. He made repeated requests that I always have my hair straight and that I always shave my hairline. This man wanted me to get a lineup on my hairline because he thought that my baby hairs were messy and unkempt. I really can't control that my hair is the way that it is, and for someone to ask me to tame my hair, to make it suit what they feel is more feminine or more appropriate, I think we would consider that to be like a microaggression. I didn't realize it until this year that that was kind of racially motivated, that he saw an aspect of me that he didn't identify with, or that he didn't associate with the typical standard of beauty, which for him was a very Eurocentric standard of beauty, and was trying to make me conform into something that obviously is not natural to me. Crazy. And I say that these things are validating, again, not in a positive way. I'm not happy that these things happen to me, but it is just very interesting that I have never felt like a brown person until I was surrounded by white people who were threatened that I was different than them. And obviously that's not going to be the case with every person. In the inverse of the situation, where I've often felt like I was too white to be brown, however, actually happened right here on YouTube. So every time you click on my video, you see me and I'm like, Hola Chula, and you know, it's just like, hey cutie, hey babe, and that's something that I thought was adorable, and it is. And somebody got really upset with me that I said that, because I think they assumed that I was a white person using Spanish vernacular to my benefit, or to my advantage, like I was appropriating Spanish words. Like, basically this person clicked on my video and they, I believe themselves, identified as being Hispanic, And they saw me and they said, you're too white to say that. You say it too white, you're too white for this. Don't say it. Like, if you aren't going to say it right, then don't say it at all. And I don't know what's wrong with the way that I say it. And to me, that really felt like an attack on me for not being brown enough. The person didn't like that I look like me and I was saying those words. Just to elaborate on this point, what I'm saying is I feel like this person was genuinely trying to gatekeep my own culture from me, and I'm not quite sure how you do that, but he certainly tried. And I guess I just don't understand how that benefits you really in any way or any other Hispanic person. I am a Hispanic person existing, and I think it's important that people know that we're not all the same. We are not a monolith. So even if you perceive me to be different from you in a way that is so offensive, well, I'm sorry, but you can't take away my culture from me. And just like I shouldn't be reliant on white people to identify me as a person of color, I shouldn't be reliant on other Hispanic people to validate my identity, because that is something that is inherent to me and cannot be taken away no matter what anyone says to me. So what have I been doing to sort of mitigate this disconnect that I've felt for such a long time? Well, for one, I have been learning Spanish. Just for the sake of myself, I think it would be really important for my development that I learn the language of the people that I come from. I've also been going by my legal name when necessary and actually pronouncing it the way it's supposed to be pronounced. And when somebody tries to use the American version, like a lot of people are really inclined to do, I will gently correct them and say, actually, that is not my name is this. And some people get it, some people don't, some people are annoyed. And if you're a person who's genuinely annoyed that somebody asks you to say their name correctly, I think that that's kind of shitty, honestly. Okay, when you think about it, like, a name is a sound, and if you're calling me by a sound that is not the sound that I told you that I respond to, then like, why should I be expected to respond to this other sound? In a way, sometimes it kind of feels like no matter what I do, I will always sort of feel like not really Hispanic. But you also have to consider that we are a very diverse people. We come in all shapes, all sizes, all colors. This is my representation of what it means to be a Spanish woman. And nobody can tell me that I'm wrong for just being who I am. It's definitely very unfortunate that I grew up really disliking this part of myself and really kind of almost being ashamed of it. I belong to a very beautiful culture, and it's just enriching me as a person to know more about it and to actually take pride in that. And if I am a vanilla Mexican, then so be it. This is who I motherfucking am and always will be. And I don't think that there's any reason to be ashamed of that. So yeah, that was just my thoughts, just my opinion, and just my video. So if you like this video, then you can leave it a like, and if you like me, well then you can subscribe to my channel, where I will be talking about whatever I want, whenever I want, because this is my channel, and that's what we do here, baby. So subscribe, and as always, chulas, I hope that you are having a beautiful, wonderful, amazing rest of your day.